Hello, welcome to this lecture on page layout using CSS. So far in the module, we've looked at how to create structure and describe content using HTML tags, how to do presentation, control, and styling with CSS on things like fonts and font weight, italics, that kind of stuff. And we looked at the importance of separating styling from content in the process. Now I'm going to take a look at how to begin to monkey about with the default way things are positioned on the page. It allows us to eventually get control of that and to create more realistic, more real-world kind of designs of parts of the page moved about where we want them to actually appear. First, we'll consider the first step of the process, which is to sketch out what we want in a diagram called a wireframe. Now, wireframes will be required for the assignment, and they're amount to kind of start anyway as a basic sketch of what you want to achieve. So you know where you go into a kind of roadmap of where you want to get to in a sense. Creating some various tools we'll look at in the workshop. It's a way to kind of communicate to yourself, to a team you're working in, and also to your client you're building the site for, probably, what your design thoughts are and how it might look and feel, get their feedback, refine based upon that. These diagrams themselves in a low fidelity diagram, means low detail, the one that was starting point on the right there. Basically show an example where in a blocky kind of fashion, where the header might be, the banner, where the search bar might be, navigation links, top right in this case, look at the diagram, logo might be, etc. To communicate those ideas to the team and to the client and for your own benefit as well. And you often start doing this by doing design for mobile these days. We call mobile first design, and perhaps develop that into how design might change, what elements the page might move to. You might add more elements, etc. to the page if it's a mobile, move up to a tablet, to a laptop, to a large desktop screen on a PC, etc. And once you've done that, of course, you then translate all that design into the code. HTML you met in week 1, and the CSS started to meet in week 2 so far. Very briefly, as we said, you start with a low fidelity one, like on the left, low detail. It's required for this module actually for the assignment. You get the basic concept, and some of you in year 2, you do the HCI module and computer science. Look at how to make a more realistic kind of design of what's called high fidelity, more detail, typography, etc. in play. And also for the assignment, and again, a real world thing to do is to annotate your diagram, your wireframe, as it's known. Some written notes with how the page should actually be developed into the finished product. For example, you can add notes there for the developer or your team or whoever, yourself later on, about what kind of fonts you might want to use, what font colors, what if it's going to be bold, italic, the width of container elements, the page, the images, etc. Background colors, all that kind of thing you can write notes on, and it aids the development process later on. So expect basic notes from you guys in the assignment, therefore, in the work you submit in a few weeks' time. As you said, once you've actually got the basic sketch, you can begin to translate the elements on the page into HTML code elements. For example, sort of what major sort of grouping areas do you need? Your header, a footer, main, navigation, a side, whatever it is. And once that's done, you can populate the grouping elements with the various bits you need in them, links, etc. And then use CSS to change the appearance. And eventually, as we'll see later on this week and next week, to monkey about with the default layout and put the piece of the page on the screen where you want them to actually be. In the next lecture, we'll look at what we refer to as overall page design, which is kind of where to move those grouped areas to, then now to the right, to the top, to the side, etc. But this week we'll focus on just how we're going to place things inside of those grouping areas. For example, how we're going to move the images and text around we want them inside of, say, the header or the footer, or the main area. How you're going to sort of style your lists and things, all that kind of design within those grouped areas is the focus of this kind of lecture as a kind of starting point. And therefore, this week's workshop tasks as well. Before we move on, let's take a look at some examples of some of these grouped areas in HTML. Again, this one I made earlier. So here we've got in our page, and outside our body, a header, the kind of banner area is going to appear at the top of the page. I decided that's going to contain an H1 to give the main purpose of the page, my favorite place in this case, logo or an image of my favorite place in there, typical thing you'd see in a banner at the top of the page, perhaps a subheading or strapline with some dummy text in there, in an H2 or a paragraph or whatever you want. Then on the page, you decide to put a navigation area. Main navigation is typically a list of links in reality. Therefore, it makes sense semantically in terms of meaning to use a list to mark up that A tags as a list. So as we've met before in previous workshops, we use a UL for an ordered list, non-bullet and non-numbered list. A list item, LI tag for each link in there, and later apply CSS to make it look like a proper list. For now, we'll get the structure right in the HTML at this point. Main, grouping area here, mouse to move right. Basically, it's kind of where you want the main content of the page, in this case some basic text, like a heading for the university, paragraphs, etc. as you wish, and a footer bringing up the bottom of the page there as well. Look at that in a browser, and let's see how that looks. Got some basic CSS only for fonts. We've got the header in there, if you can see. No logo would appear, only the mark of the alt at the moment because there's no image of that name on the website yet. The links in the middle there, followed on by the main and the footer. And we did that little sort of trick of looking at the expect element on the page. You can see where these are and the parts of the page those grouping areas take up. So there's the header, nav, main, and footer. Something else I sometimes do is colour the background in of these areas so I can see more clearly at a glance where they, what they take up, how much of the space. Let's briefly and quickly do that. So let's colour the background for the header. So I can target that using the CSS. I can say target the HTML element header, please. Curly brackets for a style rule. And then inside the style rule, I'm going to simply set the background color to a Yuki color like basic bright yellow. I can't type. There's also a nav area in there. So I'm going to style the nav area a different color. Again, so you can visually see where these things are on the page, as well as using an inspect element to see where they are and the region of the page they actually cover. What color to go for now? Green. And you can do the same for the other parts of the page as well, of course, the main and the footer, if you wished. Yeah, so let's see if that works. Refresh the page. There we go. Header's shown in yellow, so you can see what that is on the page easily, and nav in green. Gap is a default margin and padding between the header and the nav. You can take that out by setting margin to 0 on top and bottom, etc. Padding to 0 on top, bottom for both of those elements. We can play with that, of course, in the particles and see how that kind of thing works as you wish. Okay, so I've had a quick look at the concept of sketching a page of a wireframe, and said you'll need that obviously within the assignment. And we've seen basically that we then code that wireframe up into basically HTML kind of container areas into the blocks, put some content inside those, location, etc. And in the next part of this lecture, take a little short break, we'll look at how we begin to move parts around inside of those areas as the next kind of step of our knowledge of using CSS. Okay, thank you. Shall see you shortly.